Thanks for having me. I love those questions, and I tackle them in the presentation. So hopefully you'll let me know if I tackle them or not. I'm Jarrett Skorup with the Mackinac Center. My father works in construction, has done some building. I have done quite a bit, mostly on the decks and roofs myself. So I'm familiar more with kind of some of the regulatory issues that are downstream from these major projects. But I do have some experience in that. I would describe the way Michigan kind of goes about housing, which many states do, which is it's the government kind of breaking your legs and then trying to hand you crutches afterwards. And so we need to get to the point where we are not breaking the legs in the first place of the private sector economy that is trying to provide this service. I'll go through quickly kind of the problem because I think we just talked about it. You might know housing's gotten pretty expensive. Actually, for rental, we've been fairly competitive at the overall numbers. We've had high inflation the last couple of years, so that is driving a lot of what people are feeling. So even if rent costs are going just along with inflation, that's still a pretty significant increase. It's more than 20% since COVID. But home prices are up double the rate of inflation, and this has eroded Michigan's housing advantage. Obviously, inflation, building costs, things like that affect everybody nationally. But if you go back a decade, Michigan housing costs were about 74% of the national average. It's up to 80% of the national average now. So our housing is increasing faster than the housing in other states overall. A lot of the solutions that have been going through legislatively they're expensive, they're time-consuming, and overall, I'd say they're minimal. So I appreciate what MISHDA is doing, but that's a very small part of the housing market. We've got 4.5 million homes in this state, so even doing 10,000, 5,000, 800, that is very small. Most of what we need is going to be done by the private sector, in the private sector, absent a lot of what we're talking about in terms of state financing. That's just a chart of house price index for Michigan. You can see, it kind of went up till those recession years, went back down, has really spiked in recent years. And then this is rental vacancy rate. So it's going back up again, which maybe the market there is starting to soften a little bit. But as that vacancy rate has gone down, and it was even going down up through COVID, that is increasing, helping drive the increase in rental prices for people. It's suggesting we don't have enough supply in that area. Rent in Metro Detroit. I bring up Metro Detroit. I'll talk about that a little bit because we talked about one topic, zoning. Zoning is particularly strict in the Metro Detroit area, one of the strictest in the nation. I think among the 50 largest metro areas, Metro Detroit is ranked 8th. For the strictness of their actual zoning rules. And zoning is the big thing stopping development of housing. This chart is looking at what was talked about by MISHDA. So what's going on with income rates, and then what do people actually need in order to fund their housing? We're seeing this huge gap between what they can afford to put into housing, especially financing a new home versus an apartment. All right, so why are prices increasing? Interest rates, labor, material costs. We talked about them all. There's only so much the state can do about interest rates. There's only so much it can do about the cost of labor. There are some important things it can do. I'll talk a little about them, but it's tough for you guys to affect what's going on with overall bank interest rates. But most of the reason here is supply and demand. So we have a lot more demand. Supply has not kept up with this. There's a lot of things. I've got asked at a presentation, wait a second, I thought we have a state where our population isn't growing a ton, then why do we need more homes? Well, one, people want different homes. Increasingly, they want larger homes or smaller homes. That kind of middle, they want much larger homes than they have right now, a lot of people, and then some do want, maybe not those micro homes that you were talking about, but homes that are smaller, they're retiring, their kids are out of the house, they want to go to smaller homes, and the market's not keeping up of building with what people want. People are increasingly buying second homes. Vacation homes, maybe short-term rentals, those things are increasing. So even if we have the same population, if that same population wants more homes, then we are seeing problems with supply. And while our population is stagnant, the actual number of households has gone up quite a bit. We have 200,000 more households than we had 10 years ago, even though actual population is pretty close to the same. So government regulation is affecting a lot of this. So we've had a significant increase in licensing every step of the build. Licensing, what we require of builders, what we require of workers, that's more difficult than it used to be. We have energy efficiency rules, we have environmental standards. Government regulation is about 30% of everything that you build, and that's not even talking about zoning regulation, which is, can I even build at all? And if I can build, how many units can I actually build? So it's a lot more if you consider that. We have things like mandatory sprinklers. That alone, that's a $20,000 a year per going onto a house, up to 1/3. And if you go back to 1980, just a few years before I was born, regulations were about 5% of what homes were then. We haven't kept up with our permits. So this is the growth in housing permits going back from 10 years ago. The rest of the country has increased their housing permits faster than Michigan has. Look at this as like a long-term thread. The governor has said a lot of good things on this that I agree with. She said build, 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 but our build, baby, build governor has not been building. Our housing unit permits under the governor's term, this is as much as we have, pretty much stagnant for those years. And obviously, we've had a lot more demand. A lot of these things that we just heard in the previous presentation, they do take some time to come in. But if you look at the market as an overall, we're just not increasing housing the way we need to. Longer view, go back to the 90s. We're at 1/3 to 1/2 what we were doing in those years. And we were seeing more growth in our population in the 90s, but not that much more. And yet we are not increasing, we are not seeing the people pulling the permits to actually build that we saw back then. So something's broken in the housing market. Let's talk about some of the solutions, and these are mostly on the legislative side. The big issue I have is we talk very little about the supply. How do we increase supply? Because that's the big thing that's going to bring down the cost of housing. So the governor talked in her State of the State address. Misha just talked about it. We want to spend $2 billion to buy, build, or fix 11,000 units. These are not typically homes or single-family homes. They're mostly apartment buildings. So, okay, maybe, I'm pretty skeptical of government predictions, but, maybe we hit it. So, well, let's say we do it. Let's say we spend the $2 billion. Let's say we do all 11,000 units. That's $180,000 per. So the taxpayer cost side is $180,000 per apartment complex. That's enormous. I mean, even going back 15 years to builders and saying, hey, we're going to subsidize this amount of housing. That's a really high cost. And 11,000 units, Mitch just says we need 190,000 just to kind of curb this supply problem that we're having. So we're only fixing a small percentage of the actual problem for a pretty high cost. There has been a lot of bills that somewhat relate to housing over the last couple of years, but not enough have anything to do with supply. So just quickly, proposals in the last 2 years. We've proposed allowing cities to put in place rent control. We've tried to put rent control on mobile homes, forbidding the use of criminal background checks, stopping the use of credit ratings for renters, providing taxpayer-funded legal representation against property owners, not considering where income comes from, making it tougher to evict, requiring landlords to accept renters on first-come, first-served basis, encouraging tenant units. Okay, we don't have to debate all these issues now. You guys can go debate them amongst yourself. My main point is these are the main things we've said when we've said housing policy over the last 2 years, and none of that has to do with supply. In fact, all of that will restrict supply because landlords are going to have a lot more questions on, do I want to go into this? Can I actually make things work if I have to follow all these proposed regulations? On the rent control issue, alone, economist Asser Limbeck. In many cases, rent control appears to be the most efficient technique presently known to destroy a city, except for bombing. I'm glad that bill did not advance. Rent control has been a disaster. It was recently put in place about a decade ago in Argentina. It immediately led to a plummeting in the new supply of apartments there, which skyrocketed rents other than for the very lucky few who actually got rent control. We should not reinstitute rent control in Michigan unless we do want to bring back more slums and we want to harm everybody other than the select few who actually do get their rent controlled. All right, so what should we do? You asked about solutions. We had some questions about that. The governor said the rent's too damn high. We don't have enough damn housing. Our response is simple: build, baby, build, let's go. Right idea. I think we've had the wrong plan. A lot of what we're talking about is subsidizing select developments. We've had increases in overall state spending, which helps drive inflation and interest rates to a small extent. But we have new regulations proposed on labor, builders, renters, landlords. We need to actually do things that will increase supply. Supply side reforms. All right, so I like the House bills from last year that sped up the permitting process, we need to eliminate steps in the review process. A lot of this is at the local level. Some of it is at the state level. I suggest a hard limit on when reviews must be completed. We should allow for pre-approved building plan sets that can get through the inspection process quickly. So South Bend, Indiana, that's the most significant place in the Midwest that does this. If you're a builder, you can pick from this pre-approved set. The local government says, yep, this meets our plans, and you can immediately start building. So, you have places here where it takes years to get going on building. There's a project where I live in Midland, Michigan. We're 7 years in to them talking about this one project, and we still haven't broken ground yet. That's on one project where we need no new sewer, no new water lines. We still aren't going. In South Bend, there are projects that are going within a couple of months, similar projects. The tough one, limit local zoning. So Metro Detroit is among the strictest zoning laws in the country. We should allow more multifamily homes in most places. At the very minimum, cities should not have minimum home sizes. They shouldn't have mandatory parking spots. We shouldn't have these required setback limits, these aesthetic requirements. These are not having to do with health and safety. They are strictly a local preference of people. They add tremendous cost to building, or they make it flat out illegal to build at all in certain areas. I live in Midland, Michigan. We have a Meijer there, and they had to do some updates to the building of Meijer, which has been there for decades. And the city came back to them and said, you're actually out of compliance with our zoning rules. Your parking lot is too small. It was surprising to me and everyone else in town because it's a massive parking lot and it is half filled at best. Meijer, like a lot of places, have shifted their model. They do a lot more take home, pickup, quick pickup. They want people in and out of the store more quickly. And they had to get a special use permit to even be allowed to do an update to their store because they weren't meeting these minimum parking lot. Now, if you ask me, does the local city council know, or does Meijer know how much parking they need? The answer is Meijer. And if you're asking, does the local city know how much parking an apartment building needs, or the apartment building complex owners? It's the apartment complex owners. There's way too many times where government is putting in place these rules that are completely unnecessary. The private market can figure it out. We had the question about the building code. Some suggestions for the building code. Require new mandates actually go through the legislature. We should limit the ability of these state departments to set new rules. We should require an actual cost-benefit analysis on the whole code. Somebody asked a question about environmental rules. That's a good example of a way to talk about this because we get really fixated on these small rules of, well, isn't it good to just require, more insulation and better building materials? On the one hand, just in a vacuum, yes, it is. But the question for builders is a cost-benefit analysis, and the question for state lawmakers is cost-benefit. If you require a whole bunch of new environmental building codes, or every apartment complex now where you require more elevators, more staircases, things that we didn't have decades ago, on their own, that might make sense. But what you're doing is you're raising the cost so much that a lot of projects are not getting built. And when projects aren't getting built, you actually do the opposite of what you intend, which is people stay in their homes now that are less environmentally friendly than they would have if you had reasonable regulations where somebody could build and they move into one, even if it's not as strict as you actually want. Let's compare to the reality of what exists. Almost every new build is better than the alternative of what people are living in. It's better to live in a house now that's built today than one in 1950. And if you're preventing new homes from getting built, you are actually doing things that are worse for those people in terms of safety and environmental friendliness. Looking at staircase regulations, energy efficiency mandates, let's look at the code as a whole. Even if you do something where you're talking about what you're going to fund MSHDA with, and MSHDA is going into these local governments and funding projects, why don't you attach a requirement for local governments to reevaluate their zoning code if they want to be eligible for this money? Encourage them to do something on the supply side. Even if you don't actually want to mandate something, you can still encourage it. Supply side reforms work. Minneapolis, technically they have a split city council. It's split between Democrats and socialists, but they have a city council that is very much on the left. They significantly they essentially eliminated single-family zoning across the city. They are reaping the rewards of this. Their rent has been in real money going down, and it is much more competitive with other comparable cities in the Midwest. We look at this. Oh, hit back button. You scroll out on this a little bit. I like to look at California and Texas. California spends a lot of time and effort breaking the legs of their builders and then coming back in and trying to hand them crutches. That is, they have enormous regulatory obstacles in the way of people actually building. Huge permitting process reviews that take forever, and very strict environmental reviews laws, very strict requirements preventing changes to single-family zoning. But then they spend mass subsidies trying to subsidize homelessness and missing middle and low-income housing more than anyone. But the result is that is not enough to make up for the regulatory problems that they have. And so if you look at Texas, which has a much more friendly regulatory environment, they are building way faster than California is. Their housing costs are much less. And even at the homelessness population, because we know that homelessness is associated with housing costs. There are mental health issues. There are things with shelters, but for the most part, it's just people that cannot afford housing. So if you want to affect that issue, you want to do what Texas does: make it easier to build housing that helps everybody move, rather than California make it very expensive and then try to offer all these services later. Across the board, Texas prices much lower. Percentage of houses in Texas of under 100,000, 20% compared to 6% in California. All that missing middle housing, much more likely to get a house for $200,000 in that range than Texas and California. California is increasingly where a majority of their houses are over $500,000. And that is almost all because of regulatory reasons. Other states have passed statewide zoning code. California has begun tackling this. I talked about Minneapolis and Montana, full Republican legislature, House and Senate in Montana, Republican governor. They passed a code that required speeding up of permitting, limited the ability to have your entire town single-family zoning. Most cities in Montana now have to at least allow multifamily home to an extent across most of their towns, and that increased supply pretty tremendously. That's it. Happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you very much. A lot of good information, a lot of helpful suggestions for what we need to do to straighten up the state and get things moving here as far as funding or as far as building goes. So just a question. I know you said that Detroit is where a lot of the zoning problems are, but also the rural area. I come from the rural area, and I think one of the biggest concerns is that we're going to gobble up agricultural land and that sort of thing. What is a solution to that? I know that we're working on some legislation now. I think we're going to take it up this week about allowing the what do you call it, the splits to be a few more to every parcel.
Yeah.
So is that something but I think there might be some concern as far as getting utilities out there and that sort of thing. So just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes. So rural areas often escape the scrutiny because they have more land, so it's easier. But what you end up doing is, you build the city or that town, and then you start adding subdivisions, taking up farmland around it. There's always going to be people that want large homes with big lots, and I think the market can provide for that, and they can work out the rate. But what you don't want is where the government in the city area, where most of these rural areas, most of the town are only zoned for single-family homes. They say you have to have only a single-family home, and the difference between a single-family home or even just a duplex, just a home that looks like a single-family home, but it is actually two homes, that is illegal in most of our cities, whether rural, suburban, or urban. And so we could, even just by a quick tweak in zoning, allows twice as many homes as we have now. Now, if people want to live out in the country or build a subdivision in the country, God bless them, they should be allowed to do that. But what we don't want is where government is essentially forcing that to happen because they're not looking at the restrictions that they do have around in the city and in the town area. We don't want to encourage development that wouldn't or the sprawl that would happen unless people really want that to happen.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming in and talking to us about this important issue for the state.